Shikan. I'm Shishan.
Or do I call you Shikan?
Yeah. Can you all hear me? Good. Good morning. Nice to see some Tea with Dogen friends here too. You can all read online about Genzan. I'm going to say a couple of other things. Sandy in the breakout want to know how I got started with Genzan. And I want to just say that, first of all, Genzan is kind of an interesting person. He grew up as a farm boy in Manitoba, I think. He had very proudly talks about them having an outhouse. And that sort of started him on the way of the Dharma. I can get that. He eventually moved to San Francisco, where he and a couple of other people started a marketing company. He, on a trip to, I'm making a very long story short, on a trip to China to visit temples and monasteries in China, he met Roshi Joan Halifax, and she urged him to go to Santa Fe, which ultimately he did. He left his marketing company and began studying with Roshi Joan, ultimately receiving Dharma transmission from her. Golly, I think it's actually a little over 3 years ago now. Oh, I should say that I met Genzan. I was there, Pat and I were there at Upaya a number of times for courses, and he was imposing. What are you, Genzan, 6'5", 6'6"?
I'm only 6'2". I'm actually very short.
62. Well, you look giant to me at that time, and imposing figure. And I was having some difficulties, and I asked if I could speak with him, and he graciously sat down with me, and so that's how I met Genzan. And he eventually started this course, which was Tea with Dogen, for those of us who were interested in a deeper dive. I was at that time the only one online, and now we're all online because he was in Santa Fe and most of the folks were there from Santa Fe. So over the last 3 years, we've studied, I think, 16 fascicles in the Shobogenzo by Dogen, and that averages out to what, almost 16 plus the Fukan Zazenji, so that's 17, almost 6 a year, pretty deep dive. So this is all an introduction to Genzan, who is really a very, very fine teacher and a real scholar, and that's my pleasure, and a deep friend. And it's my pleasure to introduce him to you. Genzan Sensei.
Thank you so much. So first off, good morning. I think it's like 9 or 10 o'clock there for you. It's just past midnight here for us. So outside, it's finally beginning to cool down, but the air inside the house hasn't cooled down yet. So I'm trying to balance the appropriate method to keep my body cool under 4 layers of robes. So, you know, the modern way would be to crank up the air conditioning, but the problem with that is it has a very great effect on the climate. So the old-fashioned way is to drink hot water. So I'm trying to do the old-fashioned way. If you see me sipping water, that is why. I'd like to thank Mark for inviting me to come here, and I'd like to thank the center for agreeing to have me. And I would most especially like to thank all of you for your practice. Before I get to that, congratulations to the people taking ordination in Tokudo and Jukai. This really warms my heart. This really warms my heart. It's kind of strange because you're all somewhere, not here, and I'm here, and you're not here, but in a way we're all together. And this Zoom thing has become this monumental wave that has, you know, swept across the Dharma community. And it's not just in America. I was saying in the breakout room to the sensei that I attended a session at Myoshinji, which is a Rinzai temple that I could bicycle to, but I did it from my home because we're doing everything on Zoom. All Zenzenkais in Kyoto are in-person Zenzenkais are canceled. The temples, by and large, are closed. If you were in a training center before, you are probably still there now. But if you're not there now, you're probably not. We hope in the spring. So we're all doing Zoom. It's not just you. And it's kind of this remarkable thing that we've been able to create this international Zendo, you know, that I can come and see you in Chicago and you can see me in Kyoto, and I can visit Myoshinji, and so can you. And, you know, we may have to adjust our clock a little bit to make certain things, but there's so much Dharma that's being offered online that was never offered online before. And so many people have direct access to teachers that they only heard or read about before. And I think that for all of the trauma of the virus, this has been a great blessing to everyone. And I'm really interested in how this develops. You know, I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know. I don't know if we have found the appropriate form yet. And I think it may take us a while to find the appropriate form. So, nevertheless, given all of that, I know it's unusual for you to think of yourselves in this way, but you're not just sort of pioneers of Zoom Dharma, you know, you're also kind of pioneers of Western Dharma. I don't know if you actually look at yourself that way, you know, but, you know, there are many, 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 many people on the planet, and only a very few of them practice the Dharma. And so you are sowing seeds in a way. Your practice is a sowing of a seed. And it's kind of like being an old person, you know, an 80 or 90-year-old person, and planting the seeds of a redwood tree. You're planting the seeds of redwood trees. There is no hope that you will ever see the redwood tree grow up. Maybe you'll get to see a sapling, but it will be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before that redwood tree will manifest as a great redwood tree. Hundreds and hundreds of years. And all kinds of things will have to happen, which you will not be around to see or participate in. But still you plant the seed, not because you're going to get to be under the tree, not because you're going to be able to benefit from the wisdom and the grace and the gift of these trees, but because future generations will be able to benefit from this tree that you plant. But still you plant it, knowing that you're never going to benefit. You plant it for other people. This is bodhicitta. This is way-seeking mind. And to Dogen, this is the first thing that we need to practice, is to have way-seeking mind, to put others before self. This is the first thing that we need to practice. You know, Buddha said, you know, Ananda once said to Buddha, you know, I think half of the spiritual life is good friends. And Buddha said, no, Ananda, that's not true. The whole of spiritual life is good friendship. And ever since the time of the Buddha, Sangha has been considered one of the three jewels. That the Sangha, the community of fellow practitioners, is as important as the idea of an awakened mind, or the possibility of an awakened mind. It's as important as the teachings that will aid you to acquiring an awakened mind, is to have Sangha, to have people to practice with. And so each of you is a great gift to each other, and each of you is a great gift to me. You know? So originally this talk was called Leaving Home for What? And leaving home is, particularly for, I don't know the name of the person who's about to take Tokudo, but leaving home is the classic Buddhist expression for leaving the home life and entering into the monastery and the spiritual life. And this has had different meanings in different times and has different meanings today. You know, America is not a very monastic kind of practice environment. In fact, America is very much a lay practice environment. Monasteries are few, and the number of lay people to priests is very large. And even there's no temple system, if you will, you know, although San Francisco Zen Center likes to think it is, but there's really no temple system, you know, in America. And in Japan, you know, we have sort of a different kind of situation where we do have training monasteries, you know, but people go to training monasteries and they're there for a year or maybe two. They get their certificate and then they go back to their home temple, and Rohatsu is not on the menu. Sesshin is not on the menu. They may individuals have a daily zazen practice, but the Sesshin schedule, the monastery schedule, is the training thing that they went through. Then they go and they do a temple thing, and it's something else. So this idea of leaving home is different now than when we had Dogen. You know, when Dogen is talking to us about leaving home, he's talking about a different culture and a different time and a different milieu, you know, and he had different concerns, you know, and he was trying to help people in the environment that he was in. And so we have to look at, what does leaving home mean for us? You know, I often say this to all of my students, is like, you know, why is Dogen relevant to your life? Dogen is this 13th century monk who even the Soto Shu, you know, ignored Dogen for hundreds of years. Even his own people turned his back on him. I mean, he was not that guy. Why is Dogen so relevant to us? And what does it mean to leave home now? Because most of us are not going to go to monasteries. You know, I practiced at Upaya Zen Center for 6 years, Tokonji Temple. And I'm hoping to go to practice this spring if things change. But most of us are not going to go and practice in that environment. We don't have the ability, and it doesn't align with our lives. So what does it mean to leave home? Most of us are not going to leave home. You know, most of us are going to be at home in some kind of way. So how is this relevant anymore to us? You know, this receiving the precepts and studying Dogen and living this kind of Zen life. And for me, I think that it's actually never been more relevant, you know, and I feel terrible many times about the state of the world. I think it's easy to get overwhelmed by information and feel terrible about the state of the world. But I also feel like it's such a wonderful time for practice. It's such a wonderful time for practice. Dogen Zenji talks to us about continuous practice, moment by moment practice, moment by moment practice. You know, every moment, you know, every activity that we do is practice. And that's one of the reasons I hung up this scroll by Kodo Sawaki. This scroll is talking about, you can't hold on to anything. You cannot hold on to anything. But as soon as you let it go, everything is yours. If you just cease your grasping, everything is yours. This is the meaning behind this scroll. And it's a scroll more typically hung up at New Year's, but I hung it up particularly for this talk because I wanted to get this point across, is that if you just let go, everything becomes available to you. Everything becomes available to you. And that practicing moment by moment is the practice. Just practicing moment by moment. Now, the coronavirus has occupied a large part of our attention. And this has sort of pushed the climate catastrophe off the front page of the newspaper until about 2 weeks ago when the wildfires started in California and Oregon. I'm in Kyoto, and this is making the Kyoto newspaper, so it's not local news, you know. And it's a terrible thing, you know. It is a fire alarm for the whole planet, you know, as is the Amazon. But maybe the Amazon is too far away, and there are not enough white people there for anybody to notice. But there's lots of white people in California to notice, you know. California is on fire. Oregon is on fire. The Pacific West Coast is on fire. This is a huge alarm. This is a huge alarm. And it's not new. We knew this was coming, you know. There's going to be something like 1 billion human beings displaced over the next 30 years because of the changing climate. Think about what that means, 1 billion people. 3 weeks ago in Japan, we had 430,000 people evacuated from their homes because of a typhoon. 500,000 people are being evacuated from their homes because of the fires in California, right? For all the talk about caravans coming up from Mexico, the desertification of the South is going to drive people north. This is what's been causing this change in Europe, you know? The polar ice cap is melting every day. Greenland is recording its record highs. This is maybe not on the front page of the newspaper, but this is happening. Also, we're living in a pandemic. Now, where I live, everybody wears a mask. You don't see anybody who doesn't wear a mask. We wear masks when we go to the door. If there's a delivery person who comes to the door, we wear masks when we go shopping. We don't wear masks in the house yet, but everywhere else we wear masks, and everybody else wears masks too. When we do not go to, as I said, all the Zenzenkais in Kyoto are canceled. We do not go to public gatherings. You know, I haven't been on a public transportation train or a bus since January. We don't go to restaurant. We don't go and eat out in restaurants. You know, we don't go to art shows at museums. We just, everything is different, you know. Kyoto is as empty as it has been in 35 years, which is devastating to local businesses. To me, is not such a devastating thing personally, because I get to go to a half an hour walk from my house is the Kamogama Shrine, which is one of the oldest shrines in Kyoto. It's to protect the city. And I've been able to go to the shrine every morning, where I'm, with the exception of my wife, I'm virtually the only person there besides the priests. And so I've been able to create this deep connection between myself and the rock and the trees and the kami houses, and to go there and spend a full 45 minutes praying at these various kami houses every day and walking back by the river. I never would have been able to do that if it was not for the virus, because there would have been so many people there. And even when things come back, I will still have that relationship, because I've developed it in solitary practice and in silence with that shrine. But this is, you know, an unheard of thing. My point is that the virus has changed everything. This Zoom conversation is a thing. And then it changes our personal lives, because everybody is making some accommodation in some way. Because we miss our friends, because we can't congregate our friends. We want to go to sit, you know, I'm kind of a sesshin freak, so if I can't sit sesshin with other people, I miss it. You know, it's something I feel is missing for me, to be able to sit sesshin in a room with other people. Many people who used to live together and go to work in the morning no longer go to work in the morning. So now you have two people who are living 24/7, 7 days a week. And this is like putting stress on a relationship because they're not used to being around each other every day. You know, they don't really know the person who goes to work, and they see that person on the computer and they go, maybe I don't like that person so much, you know, or maybe they need more space. And then people have children they can't send to school. And if they do send to school, they're worried to school. And so we have this thing about everything in our own personal life in some way is changing. Something comes up. You know, personally, I have a grandmother who's 86 years old in Florida, and she lives in a community that's closed off, and she has neighbors bring her, you know, groceries, but she's seen nobody in months, and she's going crazy. She's locked up, and she feels like she's going crazy, you know, and I would like to help her, you know, but it's very hard for me to call her because all she can do is complain, you know, and it's so negative, and, you know, and so, you know, I have to practice with that. We have to practice with these things that we're not coming up that are all part of the virus. And so leading a life, a Zen life now is, I think, not only more important, but I think is also the easiest thing that we can do for the benefit of everyone. We can look at every activity and say, is this activity accelerating the climate catastrophe, mitigating the climate catastrophe, or having no effect on the climate catastrophe? And we can't perfectly judge the right thing to do. If you're living in Kyoto, you're probably going to turn on air conditioning. As guilty as you might feel about that. And people in your household might have different ideas about how hot or how cold it can be. But it's something to consider. Do I heat hot water and drink a thermos of hot water and raise my body to the temperature of the room? Or do I try to cool the room? Where's the energy? What is going on? Is what I'm doing aiding and abetting the transmission of the virus, inhibiting the transmission of the virus, or having no effect on the transmission of the virus? I wear a mask everywhere I go. I wash my hands before I put on the mask and I say a prayer. I wash my hands after I take off the mask and I say a prayer. I'm very careful not to touch surfaces when I'm out. You know, I'm in Japan, so it's very easy to greet people like this. You know, in America, people are more probably, you know, prone to handshake. You know, we maybe need to let that go, and maybe we all need to bow. You know, how do I model for other people? If I wear my mask correctly, does someone who's not wearing their mask correctly see me and go, "Oh, I should be more like that"? How am I contributing to the suppression of this thing or to the contagion of this thing? And then finally, how am I contributing to the harmony of my own situation? How am I living in these changed circumstances with my wife who doesn't expect me to be home all the time and suddenly I am? Or my children who have no school? Or my anxiety about my parents? Or my anxiety about my economic situation because I can't go to work? Or my anxiety about my health situation because I'm forced to go to work? How am I creating harmony in that situation? And so with these three kind of continuous teachers, continuous practice is not some kind of an abstract theory we have to worry about. It's just a moment by moment checking in with ourselves to see, how are we doing? How are we contributing? So this idea of living a Zazen life, I think, is very important. And that's why I said at the beginning, I thank you all for your practice, because whether or not you know it, your practice is changing the world. I know you don't probably think of it that way. You probably think like socially engaged Buddhism means I have to go to a protest, or I have to be campaigning in a political campaign, or I have to be like wearing some kind of silly hat, or I have to be doing something. It doesn't mean that. Zazen life has nothing to do with that. Zazen life is, how do I help save everybody else before me? How do I plant redwoods for future generations in my day-to-day activities? And we can all do that by very, very tiny things. You know, Dogen puts this great emphasis on training the body. And the reason that I believe that he puts this great emphasis on training the body is because it is a lot easier to train your body than it is to train your mind. And if you train your body, the body will train the mind. So these very simple things, this kind of monastic living that we can do is in just day-to-day life, you know, it all starts with Zazen. So Mark's heard this many times from me. My American koan is simply this: how many minutes of Zazen every day compared to how many minutes of Facebook and other social media every day? That's kind of my measure, you know. I think it's best 4 to 1. But it might be varied for you, but that's kind of, for me, I think you spend 4 times as much time in Zazen as you do in social media. That's kind of for me. For you, it might be 3 to 1 or 2 to 1 or 1 to 1 or 1 to half. You know, you have to decide. It's your practice, not mine, you know. But it begins with Zazen, you know. And then if Zazen starts with this bodhicitta, this planting of seeds for it, this taking care of other people. How can I take care of other people? And then if you look at what life is like in a monastery we have a form for everything. Literally everything. We have we sleep on our right side, not on our stomach, not on our back. You know, we go to the bathroom, we take off our robe, we snap our fingers 3 times, you know, we do this little gata, we go to the bathroom, you know, we wash our hands, we come out. We wake up in the morning, we wash our face, we brush our teeth, you know. We have there's a pattern to how everything is done. And in the beginning, it's kind of confusing and overwhelming, but after a while, the patterns just become who you are. And you just do these forms. You just do these forms. And so I encourage you to find the forms for your life. You know, the most basic ones, you know, I would suggest to you is have a form for going to bed at night. You know, have something that you do every night when you go to bed. And whether it's a prayer that you made it through the day, or whether it's releasing whatever, you know, frustration and tension and anger you have at other people, or whether it's a wish for tomorrow, have a form that you do every night at the same time when you go to bed. And then have a form for when you wake up. In Sotoshu, we have gatas for going to sleep and waking up, little prayers that we say for going to sleep and waking up. But you can write your own. They don't have to be some Japanese, you know, English translation of some 13th century Japanese text. You know, today, I'm going to be as happy as I can be today. It can be your morning gata. But create a gata, create a ritual for waking up. And then when you wake up, make your bed. Wake up, say a prayer, make your bed. And when you go to the washroom, you know, and you go to the toilet, be grateful for the water. Most people on the planet don't have the water that you have. And then wash your face and then clean your teeth, right? And you can have little gatas for that. And then make your breakfast. And then, as we say, wash your bowl. Have a ritual for going to sleep, a ritual for waking up, a ritual for eating, a ritual for cleaning. Just try it for a month and see how it changes your life. This is what I mean about a Zazen lifestyle. You don't have to sit 4 hours of Zazen a day, even if you're doing 4 hours of Facebook a day. You know, just sit 5 minutes of Zazen every day at the same time every day and watch how it changes your life. And then maybe you'll want to sit 2 5-minute periods or 2 10-minute periods or whatever. But develop consistency, develop a habit, develop a Zazen life that is based around your practice. that is based around what you do with your body. This is the most beneficial thing that you can do for other people. Now, you might say, Genzan, how does getting up and making my bed benefit anybody but myself and possibly my spouse? And I will say to you, getting up and every day and making your bed will create a certain kind of mind state that is beneficial to everybody in the world. Saying a prayer of gratitude every time you eat a meal will create a mind state that is beneficial to everybody in the world. Your practice in every way is beneficial to everybody in the world. And you don't have to be some perfect practitioner. You don't have to do anything perfect, you know? And nothing has to work out. Nothing has to go the way that you want it to go. In fact, as soon as you let go of the idea that things have to go the way that you want them to go, everything goes pretty good. This is what Kodo Sawaki is trying to tell us. You know, Uchiyama Roshi always used to say, open the hand of thought. This was his expression for Zazen. You know, open the hand of thought. Create rituals, you know, create rituals. Create forms for your life. That is what keeps a monastery running. You know, this is one of the reasons we go to a monastery. I think it's also beneficial if you chant. Now, a lot of people don't like chanting. A lot of people don't like bowing. Just try it, you know. If you're embarrassed about it, you know, I'm tone deaf, and my chanting sounds terrible. And my teacher would leave the building when I started to chant. My teacher finally said to me, just chant with the chant book in front of your face very, very quietly, because she couldn't stand the sound of my voice. And my teacher loved me. So, you know, it's got nothing, but, you know, and so I'm a little not very enthusiastic about chanting in front of other people. So, you know, even in my own home with my wife and daughter, I chant, you know, early in the morning so that it's not a thing. But try chanting. Chanting and ritual, you know, in Japanese Zen are called heart polishing. We polish our heart by chanting. You know? And I know we don't often talk a lot about prayer in Zen because, you know, Zen's supposed to be beyond all that. But pray. You know, give thanks for your food. You know, pray over every meal. You know, pray after every meal. Go, thank you. It's a prayer. You know, I'm sure many of you know about Canon. You know, Avalokiteshvara with the 1,000 arms. She who hears the cries of the world. She does hear the cries of the world. But if you're not praying, how is she possibly going to hear you? You have to pray for her to hear you. Prayer is healing. You know, and if you're embarrassed to pray, pray silently so nobody sees you. And then the last thing is what you mostly do in a monastery, mostly, besides Zazen. Second to Zazen, there's very little sleeping. And there's no social media. And there's no television. And traditionally, there's not even any internet, you know. There's none of that. Mostly what you do is clean. That's mostly what you do, is you wash floors, you brush cushions, you wash shelves, you dust statues, you clean candles, you clean candle stands, you clean altar cloths, you clean calligraphy, you clean doorways, you clean the zendo, you clean your cupboard, and then when that's done, you start all over again and you clean again. So there's this cleaning thing that's going on all the time. I encourage you to embrace that as a core principle of your practice, to be cleaning. Clean. You know, do not look at dishes as some kind of aberration that happens after you eat. Washing dishes is a form of gratitude. They're your friends. They feed you. Of course you want to clean them. Of course you do. You know, your books give you wisdom. Don't just have them lie about. Stack them kindly. Dust them off. Keep your altar space clean. Make your bed. Fold your clothes. Everything that touches you also feels your touch. Embrace cleaning as practice. As practice. If you do all of these things, which I know is not very complicated, but if you do these things, you will actually, I believe, make a big contribution to mitigating as much of the climate catastrophe as we are still able to mitigate. If you do these things, you will contribute in a big way to suppressing the transmission of this virus that is killing so many people who really want to live and is causing so many people to suffer who really don't want to suffer. And if you do these things, you will create harmony within your own environment that will be such a gift to the people who know and love you. And that's, to me, the most important thing about a Zazen lifestyle. Because we don't practice Zazen for ourselves. We don't come to the Dharma for ourselves. We come to the Dharma to benefit all beings. And in order to do that, we have to have a certain kind of mind. And in order to create that kind of mind, we have to have a certain kind of body. And as that body is trained through ritual and chanting and sitting and cleaning, the mind rewires itself. And then the whole world changes. So I think we're almost out of time. I did want to read just one little thing from Dogen Zenji, because I always feel like, well, you know, I might not make any sense, but if you get a Kodo Sawaki scroll and something from Dogen Zenji, you at least got something I know is of value. So Dogen Zenji tells us, time flies faster than an arrow, and life is more transient than the dew. With what skillful means or devices can we retrieve even a single day that has passed? 100 years lived to no purpose are days and months to be regretted. It is to be but a pitiful bag of bones. Even if we live in abandon, as slaves to the senses for the days and months of 100 years, if we take up practice for a single day therein, out of 100 years, if we take up practice for a single day, it is not only the practice of this life of 100 years, but also the salvation in the 100 years of another life. The life of this day is a life that should be esteemed, a bag of bones that should be honored. We should love and respect our bodies and minds, which undertake this practice. Depending on our practice, the practice of the Buddhas is manifested, and the great way of the Buddhas penetrates everywhere. Therefore, the practice of a single day is the seed of the Buddhas, the practice of the Buddhas, the seed of the redwood trees, the practice of the redwood trees, and the whole kit and caboodle. I paraphrase the last part. I don't know if we have time for questions, but I would love to have them if we do.
We do, Genzan. Thank you for that lovely talk. A lot to think about there and to practice with. What time is it now? It is 10:40 about. We do have time for questions, folks. And there are some good practitioners here I know have good questions. Chris, you're muted.
Thank you, Genzan, for the talk. I loved and appreciated what you said about ritual and form. But I wondered if you could speak to, is there a tipping point where ritual and form and dogma lose the plot and lose the point and becomes just an end of itself, and rather than a means to an end, or a means to peace, if that makes sense?
Is there a tipping point? I guess for me it was a little jarring when you put dogma with ritual and form, which I think is a little different. So let me say this: in my own practice, form taught me how to love. The ritualization of ordinary activities, making chopping wood and carrying water into something that contained love and gratitude and the immensity of the world, both its joy and its suffering, was of great benefit to me. I think in Zen, there is maybe sometimes a tendency to become a form Nazi. Someone at San Francisco Zen Center once said to me about forms is, I consider myself to be very traditional. Maybe not traditional, maybe old school, maybe is a bit. I'm of that ilk, and they said, well, but you don't force it on other people. And so I think when we become a form Nazi where we have to do something because that's the way it's done, then we're kind of missing the point about it. The form is so that it disappears, right? It's like if you bow 10,000 times, if you do 10,000 full prostrations, somewhere along the point, you will disappear. It will just become you. And out of that will come this flowing of gratitude and love and reverence and connection. If you're doing it to look good, you won't get that. If you're doing it to impress, you won't get that. So a lot of it is like, where's your motivation? What's your motivation? And also, this is what I said about what I meant about pioneers. Everybody's a pioneer. We don't know what the Dharma is going to look like 10 years from now because of this Zoom thing and this virus thing or whatever. Nobody could have predicted this 5 years ago. I know many teachers who said, I'll never teach online. They're all teaching online. We don't know. We don't know what happened. Your practice is your practice. And your practice has to come from you. In your heart, I'm doing this because I want to be this way, or I'm doing this because I want to be somebody. If you're doing it to be somebody, you've completely missed the point already. Because nobody's nobody. That doesn't do it. But if you do the form repeatedly enough, the form disappears. And then it just becomes the emotion. There's a famous story of, I think I'm going to say it's Philip Kapleau, but I could get this wrong, but it doesn't matter. But anyway, these Americans went to Japan for their first visit, and they went to a Rinzai temple. And the master took them down to the Founders Hall, and he offered incense and he bowed. And then he went and he said to the visitors, he said, you can offer incense and also bow to Hakuin Zenji if you wish. Hakuin is considered to be the founder of all Rinzai temples. And they were like, what? Why would we bow to this wooden statue of this dead guy? I thought you were supposed to kill the Buddha if you saw him. I thought you were supposed to burn Buddha statues. I thought you were supposed to knock all this stuff off. I thought you were supposed to spit on Buddha. And then Roshi looked at him and said, you spit, I bow. He doesn't have to convince them that what they're doing is wrong. It's not about that. It's never about dogma. Dogma is based upon the idea that you know what is right. And if you have a mind that is open and does not know, then you can never be that way. Herbie Hancock had this great story once where he was playing with Miles Davis, and he played this thing that Herbie Hancock was like, as soon as I did it, I knew it was the worst thing I'd ever done in my entire life. And I'd doing this entire show in front of, thousands of people. And Miles was like on stage, and I just blew the whole thing. It was just terrible. I was mortified. I was horrified. I was, ashamed, embarrassed. It was my worst moment as a musician ever. And Miles played it and made it work. And Herbie Hancock said, I could not figure out how he did that. And, for years. And then one day, I realized I heard the mistake. Miles heard the note. Miles played the note. He didn't play it as mistake. He didn't play it as good note or bad note or this note or that note. He played the note. He was there in the moment. He took it in as the moment. And this is the same way we have to approach forms, We can't play a piano or a trumpet if we don't know how to push the keys. But we also can't make music if we're stuck on what our idea is. Music has to be free. The form has to be free. And so you find that for yourself. Some days you're uptight. I've done lots of things, where I felt like I was being watched, or I was on show, or I was doing this, or I was doing that, or, and I went back and went, oh, that was terrible. And so, you know what? I did, next day I tried to do better. If you know me at all, one of the things I'm doing all the time is apologizing. And that's not because I'm Canadian. I mean, I know Canadians get that rap, but, the practice is vow and repentance. Vow and repentance. I make a vow to live in a certain kind of way, and I fail. If I don't recognize that I'm failing, then my vow is meaningless. And if I don't go and say, hey, I'm sorry I made the flip comment. I shouldn't have done this. I said this thing, and then afterwards I felt terrible about it. Mark knows this. I do this when I teach. I'll sometimes say, hey, I shouldn't, to me, it's repentance is what makes vow meaningful, right? If you're stuck in dogma, you can't do that because you're not looking at what's going on. You're just looking at this thing, So, but I think that's true of anything. You can be stuck that way in music or your job or your, one of the worst things is personal relationships. We get stuck in patterns with people and we fly the same pattern over and over and over and over and over again, and so we end up with two caricatures, just playing, this role. Nobody's even a person anymore. It's just my cartoon's ready to engage with your cartoon. So I think, my point is, I think is, you practice the form till the form disappears. And that will take your life, I think.
Lovely, lovely. Someone else? I want to comment on something that happened to me. Genzan was talking about the importance of gathas, and before you go to bed, when you wake up in the morning, and I frankly had none. And one day, Genzan, in a passing comment, said something to us about really nothing mattered unless you cared about other people. So this is a paraphrase gone way past what he actually said, but I started to think to myself, wow, that's really important. So at night now, before I go to sleep, I wish everyone to be, I think about specific people and I wish them that they be well, they be happy, they be free from suffering, and they live their lives with ease. And then when I finish with that group of 3 or 4 or whatever people that I know are ill, then I say it for the world. And I now fall asleep instantly after that, as opposed to when I wasn't doing it and I would toss and turn and finally, who knows when, fall asleep. So I think it works. And it's not so much the form, actually, it's just doing it now.
You know, in Soto, we often talk about, you know, Dogen as the father of Soto Shu and Kaizen as the mother of Soto Shu. You know, and if we look into that relationship, because it's not, Uchiyama Roshi practiced with Kodo Sawaki. Kaizen did not practice with Dogen. There's a gap there. It's not direct. It's not, you know. Kaizen introduced a lot of things into Soto Shu that Dogen were not how do we say, Dogen-esque, you know. Kaizen had a lot of, you know, Shingon influence and a lot of esoteric influence. And I think that, you know, one of the things that has happened in the transmission to the West of you know, and I can only speak to the Soto part, to the Soto Zen thing, is this kind of dismissal of reverence and devotion. This kind of dismissal of prayer, you know, this kind of dismissal of outside power, you know, and I think that, you know, it's important that we recognize that's also part of our lineage. You know, it's also part of our lineage. You know, chanting and prayer is I think is so beneficial to people. And I wish that, you know, I was fortunate in that I was brought up, you know, in a family full of, you know, socialists who had, you know, not very much time for religion. So I had no bad feelings about religion because I didn't have any experience of it. So it was very easy maybe for me to come to some of these things easier than other people who had bad experiences as children. But I wish more of us could open up to chanting and prayer. You know, I really do. I think that, you know, it's such an intrinsic part of life, you know, and I know, you know, like in my own house, my stepdaughter is like, Dogen, you know, she does not want to know, you know, at all anywhere about Dogen. But, you know, it's because, you know, my wife, well, you know, her grandfather and her great-grandfather and her great-grandfather and her, it's all, you know, priests going all the way back, you know. But there's so much of daily practice. It's just like we all wait and sit down and, you know, bow before every meal, and we all bow after every meal, and there's a prayer for that, and we bow after we do dishes. And, you know, all of this is very normal here. I know it's kind of foreign in America in a way, you know, but it doesn't have to be. It's only foreign if you don't reject it, you know. It's like every time we bring our hands together, you know, the relative and the absolute, the body and the mind, you know, the dream and the reality, the giver and the gift, you know, the needy, you know, and the heartbroken. We bring the whole world together every time we bring our hand together. And if you just do that for yourself, it doesn't matter about the person you're bound to, just doing that for yourself puts you in harmony with the universe. It does. You know, and then the other person feels it. They don't have to be a Buddhist. They don't have, they can think you're the weirdest bald-headed person on the, I shave, not bald, but they can think you're the weirdest bald-headed person on the planet. And they still get the feeling, you know, they still get the feeling. In the same way that if you give somebody a dirty look, they get the dirty look. They might not know why you gave them a dirty look, but they get the dirty look. You give them a really heartfelt gasho, and they receive it. And it's energy, it reverberates, you know. This is what I mean. You don't have to go to a protest to change the world. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't. Right now, I advise against it, and if you do, wear a mask. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be politically involved. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't, you know, be socially engaged, whatever that might mean to people, you know. Your practice changes, physically rewires your brain. Your bodily practice, your practice of zazen, your practice of ritual, your practice of chanting, your practice changes the energy field that you emanate into the world. And people receive that energy and it changes them. And you might not be able to see it, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. You can't see all the karma you're generating either. Some of it you can see, and some of it you can't see. But it doesn't mean it's not happening. You know? And just being in tune with this, you know? It's like, it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to say the wrong thing. It's okay to, like, you know, bow in the wrong place, or put the incense stick in at the wrong time, or ring the ink in at the bottom instead of the top, or whatever. Then the roof is not going to fall down. You know, it's okay to snap at your spouse, but then apologize. It's okay to be short-tempered with your children, but then tell them you love them, that you didn't mean it. Nothing has to work out the way you think it should. You just have to give yourself. If you live a life of practice, this is the natural thing that you're doing, constantly giving. It's always vow and repentance. It's always vow and repentance. Nobody does life perfect. If you were doing life perfect, you wouldn't be here. You'd be somewhere where people do things perfect. Wherever that might be.
It got sucked up in a black hole somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know.
Thank you, Genzan.
My point is just practice. Just take as much of this kind of fire hose of technique. And you don't have to take it all. Just take one. Just make your bed up every morning. Just take one. Just take anything and do it for 30 days and watch how it changes the way you are in the world. And just keep adding on and adding on and adding on. And eventually, if enough people practice, we'll get into a better place. You will certainly get into a better place. You will certainly get into a better place. And everything around you will get into a better place too. And that's the point. We don't practice Zazen for the sake of ourselves. We don't practice Dharma for the sake of ourselves. We practice Dharma so that we can save the world. Right? Which, as Cobocino said, is a really big job. So first we sit down for a while.
Yeah, thank you. And I know you did this for us, staying up to 1 a.m. your time. I know that you get up early to sit Zazen, so I hope you have some good sleep. Thank you, Genzan. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I really enjoyed this. I hope you got something worthwhile out of it. And if you did, merit goes to my teachers and, of course, to you for coming and participating.
Thank you, Genzan, very much. We appreciate you very much.
All right. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
And you a good sleep.
Arigato gozaimasu.
Arigato.
ありがとうございます。